Welcome. This is a great day at Georgetown. We are here to do something that's just pure fun, launching the Beck Center on Social Impact and Innovation. And I can tell you there's a large group of people who've been working towards this day for a long time. Some of you are in the audience and share in this joy of what we have the potential to do, and so I congratulate you. I'm happy to be here with President DeGioia, Father O'Brien, and distinguished honored guests Pam Omidyar, Jean Case, and Salim Ismail. And I thank you for joining us on this important day. I have been fortunate in my short time here to do a little work with Alberto and Olga Maria Beck for the past year in designing and setting up the center. And I am deeply moved by their passion and their commitment to the vision of what this center can be and to this institution, Georgetown University. And I thank them for their generosity, and I look forward to many years of other such collaboration. I can also say the timing of the launch of this center is ideal for another reason, and that is we are embarking on a deep period of reflection on designing the futures of Georgetown University. And I can't imagine a better forum to help us do that wisely. Indeed, the center builds on the deep core values of Georgetown, its strengths in that regard, and also its desire to have global impact. It wisely builds on work that's been going on here already in almost every school. And the center's aspiration is to amplify the effects of that good work in ways that will make us even better in this domain. It wishes to inspire and prepare students, faculty, and global leaders with a set of skills to generate and to innovate solution-based social change locally and across the globe. To generate and innovate solution-based social change. It will do this in a way that's deeply collaborative among all the sets of people who occupy our community. So some of you might ask, so why are we interested here at Georgetown in social impact and innovation? At its core, social innovation is about a holistic engagement with the world, one that rejects the sectors of for-profit and not-for-profit as being important, different sectors, and instead embraces the concept that major challenges that face us in the world aren't going to be solved by one sector. They're going to be solved by reconceptualizing the strengths of multiple sectors and putting knowledge together. And further, that those affected by the innovation and the change are in there. They're part of designing and governing the interventions. And if you reflect on this more than 30 seconds, you realize how close this is to the values of Cura Personalis and the other Jesuit motivating missions of Georgetown. The defining challenges and opportunities in this century are ones that span borders and sectors. They're not going to be solved within a nation state. They're not going to be solved by taking only one approach. We here at Georgetown have great strengths in public policy and international affairs and civic engagement. And if we are wise, we will use this generous gift to help further the ability of our students, our faculty, and partners to continue increasing the impact that we have on the world. The center is located under the provost's office for a real reason and a symbolic reason. It is designed to be a resource for the entire university. It is not of a single school, it's of all of us. And when it achieves its full promise, it should be serving and bringing together people throughout the community. We are thrilled that Sonal Shah will be the first executive director of the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation. You brought your posse with you. She comes, as you know, and if you haven't met her, you must meet her. She comes with enormous experience in this area, in the public, the nonprofit, and the for-profit sectors. She is, in our belief, precisely the type of leader we need to found this center and to propel it forward. If you're looking at the schedule, you're going to see that we have a busy day planned for you. For some of you, it'll be a long day, but I hope it's a joyous day and a stimulating day, and one that you will remember years hence. I welcome you again to this event, and it's my privilege now to welcome Father Kevin O'Brien, Vice President for Mission and Ministry, to give the blessing.
Olga and Alberto, it's an honor to be here as your friend and to bless this occasion today. For the Beck family, their faith is very important, and as we do at Georgetown at all important occasions, but particularly this one, we realize that all of our efforts are directed to the greater glory of God in the best of the Jesuit tradition. So please join me in our prayer of blessing. Good and gracious God, we thank you for gathering us here today, and we ask your blessing upon us. As we begin this new work at Georgetown, we ask you to inspire in us vision and creativity, persistence and empathy. Give us a spirit of openness to new ideas and new relationships. Help us to imagine new possibilities for collaboration. Above all, help us to see the needs of the world that are not being met. This is what your son, St. Ignatius, asked for his new company of men nearly 500 years ago. In both their holy idealism and their realistic grasp of the signs of the times, they came together to set the world on fire with your love. And so now do we accept this noble commission in our time. We come before you with holy desires to make the world a more just and gentle place, a place more in your image. And so, dear Lord, inspire in us words and deeds, thoughts and actions that will help us make your dream for the world a reality. We ask your blessing upon the Beck family and all the good people who helped bring to the light of this day this newest center of Georgetown. With grateful and hopeful hearts, we now entrust to you all of our labors with great hope, for we know that every good work begins in you and through you is happily ended. Amen.
It is now my pleasure to introduce the president of Georgetown University, John J. DeGioia, to give his remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. I want to thank you for your outstanding leadership, enabling all of this to be a part of this new moment for Georgetown. And it is a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon to celebrate the launch of an exciting new initiative, the creation of Georgetown's newest academic center, the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation, which is made possible through the extraordinary generosity of Olga Maria and Alberto. And I wish to extend on behalf of our entire Georgetown community our deepest gratitude to you both for entrusting us with your vision for a place that will, through the creativity of our community, of our students and of our faculty, to create, contribute to, and advance positive, lasting social change here in Washington, D.C., throughout our nation, and throughout our globe. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, as well as with your children, Matthias and Leticia, current Georgetown students, as well as Alberto and Alvaro. I'd also like to thank Sonal Shah, who will serve, as Bob mentioned, as the executive director of the Beck Center. As Bob also mentioned, Sonal brings to our community a depth of experience in the business, nonprofit, and government sectors. And we can't begin to tell you the excitement and enthusiasm that is present here on our campus, as everyone who has had an opportunity to spend any time with her imagines the possibilities that will emerge through the Beck Center. So we're deeply grateful, Sonal, to your presence here. Welcome to our community, and we look forward to the contributions and impact that you will continue to make now through your new role here. And finally, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. This is a special moment in the life of a university community, and it's inspiring to see so many folks wanting to be a part of sharing this special moment with us. Just last month, Georgetown celebrated the 225th anniversary of our founding. And over the course of 2.25 centuries, we have been building upon a tradition that compels us to actively respond to the greatest challenges and most pressing issues facing our world. Ours is a tradition that began nearly 500 years ago in Spain with St. Ignatius of Loyola, who founded the Jesuits as an order with a distinct mission to engage with our world, to identify its greatest needs, and to work to meet them. As a university founded in this tradition and informed by our Catholic and Jesuit values we animate by serving one another, we are always seeking new ways to live and reimagine what St. Ignatius called our way of proceeding. Now in this 21st century, as our world changes, we too must evolve. As human needs deepen and become more complex, we too must adapt better to address them. And as technology and innovation transform our lives, we too must invigorate and model the tools that we use for impacting the world around us. The Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation embraces this dynamic and enables Georgetown to more quickly anticipate and respond to the ever-evolving and shifting challenges of contemporary society. Whether it's in areas like exploring new delivery systems to improve public health, or developing new approaches to investing that yield lasting social impact, or to creating new models of analysis to guide future work in this important field, the Beck Center will work with students, faculty, practitioners, and thought leaders to craft solutions to our world's most pressing issues. It will be a place where scholars and students from across the university can come together to foster interdisciplinary collaboration that will lead to discovery and innovation. It will lead to progress, to impact that we believe can create meaningful social change across multiple sectors. It will build upon our existing strengths, including our location here in Washington, D.C., which over the centuries has allowed members of our community to disproportionately contribute to some of the most consequential policy debates in our history. And being situated right here in the nation's capital, the Beck Center will have the unique ability to convene business, nonprofit, and government leaders, along with entrepreneurs, to learn from one another and to explore together new methods and approaches to solving social issues. Partnering with our newly founded McCourt School of Public Policy and the massive Data Institute that is a part of the McCourt School. The Beck Center will reflect data-driven, policy-relevant, actionable ideas and solutions. And all of this work is guided by the values that we share as a Georgetown community. It is guided by the aspirations that each one of us hold for ourselves, for our communities, and for our world. It is guided by the ways we seek to live our tradition, a tradition that asks us to actively address the most pressing issues of our time. And the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation will provide us with new ways to do this work, to animate this tradition and reimagine it in the 21st century. So it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And now for me to introduce to you two dear friends of Georgetown who have made today possible, Olga Maria and Alberto Beck. Both Alberto and Olga Maria have been actively engaged in working for social change for many years. Alberto has long been engaged with Georgetown through his service as chairman of our Latin American board, and he devotes much of his time to social enterprise work through his service as chairman of Lumni, a human capital development organization, and Sin Límites, a group that promotes social leaders through media. Currently serving as director of Virgin Hotels, he's a member of the Group of 50, which brings together the most successful and progressive business leaders in the Americas. Olga Maria, an alumna of Georgetown, graduated from our School of Foreign Service in 1981 with a degree in international economics, and she remains deeply committed to our community through her service on our Board of Regents and the Board of Visitors of our School of Foreign Service. She's actively engaged in education, having served as both board member and president of School and Home for St. Stephen's Episcopal School, and she also serves as president of the Beck Family Foundation. Alberto and Olga Maria, I want to thank you again for your extraordinary generosity, for trusting in us, your vision to create a place that will contribute to society by creating positive, lasting social change. Again, on behalf of the entire university community, you have our deepest gratitude. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Olga Maria and Alberto. This is an incredible moment for Georgetown. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jack, Bob, for your remarks and very kind words, and Father Kevin for your beautiful blessing. This is a very exciting and important day for our family, and we are very proud to join Georgetown's leadership, faculty, students, alumni, friends, and especially our family in such an important occasion. Thank you to all of you for being with us today. As a family, we have always strongly believed that we have an obligation to do public good and to have an impact in the world. So over 6 years ago, my wife Olga Maria and I decided that we wanted to contribute in a meaningful way to the fast and exciting changes that are taking place in the social sector. We have seen the world go from a local, linear, and large institutions world to a global world where the exponential growth in technology has empowered and connected individuals and smaller institutions in ways that we have never seen before, where new models of impact are being developed, and sectors that used to be silos are working together to affect change. We have gone from an existentialist and individual model that measures the number of people served or dollars spent, to asking ourselves how we can solve problems and achieve impact in a sustainable and a scalable way, in a way that measures the improvements in the lives of people around the world. We're also creating new ecosystems of collaboration for people to work together, and we're giving a voice to those that have been left behind. All of this is providing a very exciting and unique opportunity to have a much greater impact in society today. So with this background, we looked at how to best channel our efforts and embarked on a journey of discovery. With the guidance and support of our brother-in-law, Carl Muñana, who has many years of experience in the social sector, we met with a number of social leaders and institutions, both here and abroad. We deepened our understanding of the needs and trends in the sector and studied what other organizations and universities were offering. Many of the people with whom we talked and that devoted their time to us are here with us today. So 3.5 years ago, we put together a proposal for a center, approached Georgetown, and started a conversation with the university as to how to bring such an initiative to the university. Today, we're very proud to launch a center that will serve, as Bob mentioned, as an amplifier of existing initiatives, as well as an igniter of new ones at Georgetown and outside of Georgetown. The center will educate by inspiring and preparing students, faculty, and global leaders with the necessary skills to generate and innovate solution-based change around the corner and across the world. It will promote thought leadership on issues related to social impact and innovation. The center will convene and connect by providing collaborative spaces, both physical and intellectual, that will foster impact and innovation, as well as experiential opportunities that will pragmatically affect and impact the social sector. An example of one of the experiential opportunities is GU Impacts, which is an initiative that we launched 2 years ago in anticipation of the creation of the center. GU Impact sends undergraduate students to an asset and solution-based experience with local communities in Latin America and in Africa. Working with a community, the students identify their assets and develop solutions to their challenges. To date, 38 students have participated in this program, and we're in the process of selecting the students that will attend to this year's program. The center will be policy relevant and cross-disciplinary, with a particular focus on action. And for us, the key to the center's success is the leverage that it will generate through the right partnerships, inside and outside of Georgetown, because today's problems cannot be solved by one person, institution, or center. They need collaborative efforts of all shapes and forms. We believe that Georgetown is the ideal place to launch this initiative. First, because of the important role that academia must play in this sector in terms of educating, convening, and driving thought leadership. But Georgetown also provides a platform unlike any other institution. As President DeGioia said, in that the focus of this effort will be on undergraduate and graduate students, and with a cross-disciplinary approach that leverage Georgetown's strengths and global reach. But most importantly, the work of social impact and innovation not only reflects, but builds on Georgetown's values and directly supports the university's mission of scholarship and service. Over the years, our relationship with the university has grown and become a very special relationship to us. It started in 1977, when Olga Maria Campano came to study development economics at the School of Foreign Service and fell in love with the university. That was, of course, before she had met me. This relationship has deepened through different levels of engagement, as Jack mentioned. In the case of Olga Maria, as a member of the Board of Regents and the Board of Visitors of the School of Foreign Service, and having served for 25 years in the Alumni Admissions Program Committee. And in my case, through my years of engagement with the Latin American Board, which I started over 7 years ago. And of course, as parents of 2 Hoyas. Our relationship with Georgetown is not only relevant, but very meaningful to us. As you all know, the success of any initiative depends on the right leadership, especially when it brings quite a fan base. And we're very fortunate to have attracted an extraordinary person to lead the center. Sonal Shah is an outstanding entrepreneur, innovator, thinker, and professional with a vast experience that spans the public, private, social, and academic sectors. In the public sector, at her latest job as director of the White House Office of Social Innovation and Citizen Participation, as well as at the US Treasury, where she started her career. In the private sector, at Google, leading their global development initiatives, and at Goldman Sachs, leading their environmental strategy. In the social sector, as a co-founder of Indicor, and as a senior fellow at the Case Foundation and at the Center of American Progress. And in the academic sector, as a resident fellow in the Institute of Politics at Harvard. But more importantly, Sonal is a wonderful, dynamic person who is passionate about the mission of the center, and we have truly enjoyed and benefited greatly working with her over the past few months. As with all events, and forgive me for this, but there are many thank yous. The most important for me is my wife, Olga Maria, who introduced me to this wonderful university that is Georgetown University. It is a place that educates your mind and develops your soul. Thank you, Olga Maria, Pioja, for being my partner in everything that we do. I want to thank our children, Alberto Miguel, Matias, currently a Joya, Leticia, also a Joya, and Alvaro for your love and support on this endeavor. Thank you, Carl, for being our social sector compass and such an integral member of this effort. I want to thank Bart Moore, our friend Bart Moore, who took interest in this initiative from its inception, provided outstanding critical and strategic thinking, and shepherded through the university. Jose Montero for providing invaluable support. Provost Gross, Bob for taking on the responsibility to be the patron and lead person at Georgetown and for enthusiastically supporting this effort. And a special thank you to Jack DeGioia, President DeGioia, for providing the strategic leadership and reflection that has made Georgetown a very special and exciting place to be. To Pamo Meteor, Gene Case, Salim Ismail, Nadia Romani, and the friends from Free Range Studios, thank you for your interest in the center and for making this such a special launch day. A special thank you to the many people and organizations who at some point have been generous and helpful in the ideas and design of the center. Many of you are here. Unfortunately, I cannot name you all, but you should know that you have already made quite an impact. To the students present, I want to tell you this is your center. This is your launch pad to becoming or developing into social change actors, and that you will be integral to its value and success. Thank you to the Georgetown community as a whole for embracing this initiative, and we're very much looking forward to working with you in the years to come to lead change and drive impact in the world.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. And it's great to see this room. Not only are all the seats filled, but the sides are all filled. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for coming to such an important event, and especially at Georgetown, but also in Washington, D.C., to have a Center for Social Impact and Innovation in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown. Two things couldn't come together better as it does today. Before starting, I want to just take a moment to remember someone really important in the field of social innovation and social enterprise, Greg Deese. He founded a similar center at Duke University many years ago. Today is his memorial service. So I just want to say let's celebrate him and the importance of social entrepreneurship that he heralded almost 20 years ago. He put it on the map thanks to his leadership in academia and talking about it. And today we get to celebrate it in setting up a center at Georgetown University. So I just want to take that moment. And then next, I just want to take a moment to thank this whole team who made this launch happen. It's easy to think that it's just about one leader. It really is about a village and about the team of people that make this happen. So I want to start with Dean Thomas, Matthew Lewis, Gail Garraway for this beautiful space. If it hadn't been for them, we wouldn't have this space today, and I really want to thank them for that. Bart Moore, Mary Paris, Ben Shaw, Christine Bendorf, Robbie Bantam-Graham, and their colleagues for everything that you do in making this work. God help you. Thank you. Stacy Kerr, Rachel Pugh, and the communications team for the phenomenal communications and for everything that they've done. The amazing team of student volunteers. Kate Anthony and the SIBS team, Christian Holkberger, Craig Casey, Miriam Warren, Evan Whitney, Holly Gilman, Chantel Jairam. They were up until 2 o'clock in the morning putting everything together. So just to give you a sense of commitment and just the energy that they bring to the table. I want to thank my siblings who are here. They drove in for this event, and I really... To have people come in, my sister donated a kidney a few months ago, to come in and just pipe in and say, I will do whatever it takes, whatever you need, just come. Well, she was here this weekend doing whatever it took. And finally, the Beck Center team. Mark Hannes, Michael Wang, and Amanda Delp, if you're here, please stand. They're probably outside. This definitely would not have happened without them. So it truly takes a village, and it's important for me to remember, and for all of us to remember, that it is about team effort and teamwork that brings all of these great ideas together. President DeGioia, thank you. Your commitment to social impact. I remember when you reached out to me when I was at the White House, and it was such a generous reach out to me at the time. It was very early in my tenure there. Thank you very much for making it relevant and making me relevant. I really appreciate it. Provost Groves, your continued support, continued guidance, continued leadership in setting up the center and always responding to emails even at random hours of the night. I really appreciate it, and thank you for having the confidence in me. Alberto and Olga Maria, humble, thoughtful, passionate. They're just a few of the words that come to mind when I think about you. But I always feel lucky to have met and worked with amazing people in my life, and you two just bring all of that together. Thank you so much. I know this is your vision, so thank you for giving me that. Social impact, innovation, social change, change makers, it's the lexicon that we all seem to be talking about. It's not only, it's the generation of students at Georgetown, but around the world and around the country that are talking about how to have social impact, how to make social change. And universities have the opportunity to train that generation of leaders to meet those challenges, to provide the thought leadership and the space for these collisions, conversations, and ideas to happen. This is precisely what we're going to do at the Beck Center. We're going to offer skills-based classes for students on social impact and innovation. That includes things like design thinking, which there'll be a session on today, storytelling, fundraising, negotiation, empathy, public-private partnerships, all the terms that we tend to use, but we need to train for. And just that skill to have it, to be able to go do it when you go into your jobs. It's the things that I learned over many years, but it'd be great to teach it earlier so people can use it sooner. And it's what's needed as these worlds are beginning to collide. We're going to offer experiential opportunities, as Alberto talked about, and partner with others across the university that are also offering these opportunities to make sure that the students get the best experience that they can when they go overseas or when they go work on projects. We're going to provide thought leadership on key topical issues. We're in Washington, D.C. We should be policy relevant. We should take the social issues and make it policy relevant. And that's what we're going to do. Issues like impact investing, where we're already partnering with the Global Social Enterprise Initiative at the business school to bring policy relevance to those issues. Issues like impact and measurement. How do you measure the impact of what we're having? Those conversations are already taking place locally, nationally, internationally. Leaving opportunity for students to come with their ideas, to incubate your ideas. The Global Social Venture Lab. The Social Venture Lab has already come with an idea they want to promote. They want to have a cross-disciplinary opportunity to get experiential learning and to house it at the center. But we need more. We want more. We want you to come with your ideas to this place. And finally, the space. If you haven't been there, ICC 100. It's open for students, faculty, mentors, community members. Come there. Come share your ideas. Come hang out. Come see the space. Come talk to the students. Come think about what we can do to make social change happen. We're approaching the center in a lean startup approach. Learning, adapting, testing, executing. We're not setting it up high up and saying we're going to solve these problems and then we're going to go do it. We're going to learn as we approach it. We'd like to solve some problems. We're going to learn what we learn. We may fail at times, but without failure, there is no success. And finally, our ethos, like the Georgetown ethos, will be to do this with humility and compassion for those that we serve. None of this matters if we don't keep in mind who we're serving and why we're doing it. So with that, it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce two incredible women who personify everything that we hope to do at the center. They are leaders in so many ways, and two people who I personally admire. First, I'd like to introduce Pam Omidyar. We're so honored that she is here today. She's a mother and a surfer. It's important. A philanthropist with a belief in humanity and leveraging technology to affect social change. She and her husband, Pierre, are guided with some core values of humanity and the importance of treating others with compassion, dignity, and respect for diversity. And as you will see, she does this with such incredible grace. It is with these values that she has started Hope Labs, Humanity United, and co-leads the Omidyar Network and the Ulupono Initiative. I'm sure I messed that up. Incredible organizations. If you don't know them, please look them up because they're making real change and having a real effect. Next, I'd like to introduce Jean Case, mother, philanthropist, executive, technology. She believes in the power of technology and is passionate about technology's potential to change the world. She's the CEO of the Case Foundation, where I've been lucky enough to work with her, where they invest in innovative approaches to catalyzing civic participation, promoting collaborative and innovative leadership. She's also an executive in residence at Georgetown at the Global Social Enterprise Initiative. And as I said, I have been extraordinarily lucky to have been able to work with her at the Case Foundation, where I will continue to be a senior fellow. So please join me in welcoming Pam and Jean. So Pam and Jean, what a great time to be here. And I know both of you have been involved in social change and social sector for so long. And to see this coming to Georgetown is exciting for me, largely because I love Washington, D.C., but also because I think it's amazing what's happened in 20 years and how much change has come about. So I'd like to start with you, Pam, a little bit. Could you just tell us a little bit more about the work that you do and just a little bit about you and how you got interested on these issues?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'd like to thank the Becks, who I just met for the first time this morning, and just truly honored and delighted to get to know you. And this is really just quite wonderful to be together on this day. And I think today, as I talk, I'm going to quote Niels Bohr, who was a physicist. And so please consider that every sentence that I utter should be regarded by you not as an assertion, but as a question. And I think kind of goes to all of our work that where we have mental models and we think we're good and we test something, but then we learn more and then we adjust. So I'm not quite sure where to start. I think just growing up, there's a few things that sort of were part of my life that I observed. One was just looking at just family members who were dying of cancer, and the notion of suffering around cancer was just sort of striking to me. And in elementary school, I had this, it's kind of an obsession about World War II and the Holocaust. And I grew up in Hawaii, so as a 4th or 5th grader, it was unfathomable to me to actually see that kind of scale of suffering and killing. And I thought that was just something that, why did people do this? And so that fascination with sort of human behavior and what drove it, I think, has been a thread throughout our work. Also in college, that's where I met Pierre. And apartheid was a big movement among the students. And while I was really just the science geek in the laboratory, just really watched the students be very, very active. I actually chose Tufts because when I went to visit there as a senior in high school, they had taken over the administration building to protest the university's investment in parts of the apartheid regime. And I just really loved seeing that passion. And when you look at some of our work, you'll see that we have definitely an activist kind of component. Long story short, graduate degree in plant molecular genetics, short of the PhD, in part because the means weren't justifying the ends for me in academia. Another reason why I love this sort of deep sense of collaboration with across sectors. But really, what allowed this gift to be able to do this work is my husband's, the success of his company, which was eBay. And we just always knew that we wanted to use that wealth, which we certainly didn't need, to actually sort of in the Gandhian notion of stewardship, to actually use it to be in service to what people needed and wanted for their lives. So now we have this title of philanthropist, and initially, I don't know how long, 15 years maybe doing this, and it's kind of an awkward title to have this name. But then when you really look at the name philanthropist, it's someone who doesn't just love people, but loves all the things that humankind is dependent upon, our planet and all the living things around it, and that deep interconnection. And so if that's the label, then I think that's really nice to have. So
that's a really, I've not heard that definition, but it's such an interesting definition of philanthropist and such a beautiful way of saying that. Jean puts it right on to you as a philanthropist also, but also you started the Case Foundation 17 years ago.
We did.
What motivated you to start the foundation, and what have you learned, what have you and Steve learned over the years?
Okay, I know we've heard like 1,000 acknowledgments today, but I do want to acknowledge the Becks. Remarkable people, remarkable gift to this institution. As I said to them, I think what's going to happen is the return on investment is going to go on and on after today, largely made possible because of your wonderful gift that creates this center. President DeGioia and Provost Groves, thank you very much for your leadership in making this happen too. But to the subject of philanthropy, it's funny what Pam said, because I was raised by a single mom who was a waitress, raising 4 kids alone. And so when we decided to start the foundation, and somebody referred to me in an article as a philanthropist, she said, wait, what is a philanthropist? It's a funny term, really it is. But for us, our roots really, I think, go back, as Pam said, to our very early years when I think we were taught that to whom much is given, much is expected and required. So I think that sort of value was in both my husband and I as we were being raised. But I had the unique opportunity to sort of dabble in the philanthropy front, if you will, From a corporate standpoint, when I was at AOL, we started the AOL Foundation after the company began to see some extraordinary success. And that was truly our toe in the water around this world of foundations and philanthropy. And we learned a lot. And so when I went on and retired from AOL, we then started our family foundation, and we were able to bring at the start, we were on a huge learning curve, but we were able to bring at the start a little bit of lessons learned from that very early experience. But I will tell you one thing, and I know Pierre and Pam might feel similarly, I don't know, and they're such innovators in all that they do. But we kind of thought, all right, we've built businesses, we got this. This is about, trying to do some good. And we had no idea how much harder it would be to give away money in a way that was truly impactful than it was to build success in business and know it. It was a much harder job. And I still think today, it took us about 5 years, certainly me, to feel like I kind of got my sea legs. I don't know about you guys, Pam, but it took a few years to realize, okay, what is this new world? And I thought I had to be something a little different. And what I ultimately learned was the very same things that drove us and helped us build success in other ways in life were probably going to be the same things that would bring us success in philanthropy. And I think we really feel that way, that when our passions are there, when we're using our core skills, many of them business skills, that's when we feel like we can make the most impact.
Yeah. And Pam, you alluded to this a little bit in your opening in terms of talking about what motivated you in getting to where you are. There's so much underlying that, and a lot of it is just the values that you bring. I mean, I just gave, at the opening, just a very simplistic way of saying, but I'm very interested in thinking about what underlies your values in the work that you do, not just as a philanthropist, but the organizations that you so strongly and have deeply rooted yourself in.
Sure. I think you did say them, and I think some of them are actually right here behind us, so that's really, really wonderful. But if you go back to the core founding of eBay, it was the creation of a level playing field and increasing access to markets by an individual or small business. And when Pierre first started it, he actually wrote a letter, and he said, "This is a grand experiment." And I heard you say that this morning when we met, Alberto. And I think that this is we're still learning. All our foundations are experiments, and they will be ongoing. But this notion that you can trust a complete stranger, right? That people are basically good, they're inherently capable, but they're not all given access and opportunity, is something that drives the core of a media network, which is, I think, our largest foundation. But independently, and from that, we have other foundations. I think when Hope Lab was created, it was really this idea I had after I left graduate school. Or actually, I had the idea when I was 21, but the concept of doing it was, I was working in a research laboratory as a technician growing cancer cells at Stanford for the researchers. And I'd go home and, I'm the science geek and my husband's the computer geek and we play video games. So this notion that you could, this notion that you could, if you had a video game which could just help young people visualize killing other cancer, but then I think, over time, I think it was meeting with folks on their first iteration of a Mid-Air network, which was the Mid-Air Family Foundation. And I realized that we could actually do the game and that there'd be immense power in designing this video game for young people with cancer. And I think it was it was one of the first tests in this cross-sector approach where we were working directly with patients, which was ultimately the people we were trying to serve, but with caregivers and physicians and also this and researchers, but also where I think the innovation came in was actually game developers who, if game developers can motivate people's behavior better than anyone else, better than psychologists. And you get kids to play these games for days at a time. So I think putting those together was a challenge, and we had quite a lot of failure. And, but what I love is from Remission 1, or Remission, which is our first game, we did full-on clinical trials, over 350 patients. I want to say a few dozen sites, but Pat can correct me. And we actually showed that the game did what we designed it to do. So when we talk about innovation, I think the intention around it is really important. You can't just throw it out there and say, oh, what does it want to do? You actually have to think about intention. But Remission 2, that just came out last year, we continued to learn why the first Remission worked. And then because of the improvements and advances in technology around video games, we could develop the game. I mean, it was 100,000 times less to develop Remission 2. And then we did trials, and we showed that it actually had more of an impact than the first one on the measures that we wanted to show. So I love that we kind of can keep doing that, and we can also do innovation on, we have ZAMZ, which is an activity meter, and take those same principles but apply it to a different type of chronic illness. So, just going back to the cancer, I realized that I was not going to be the one to cure cancer, even though, I announced it to my high school class, some that all seniors had to do. And I said, that's what I want to do. But I did realize that I could change a person's perception about their disease and their illness and give them a much better sense of control over it, and show them through actually gameplay and technology that they can make better decisions. And when we're doing the science around why that works, which is, I think, really exciting and will inform future work.
Yeah, and what I love about Remission and Remission 2 and Hope Labs and what you're doing there is just all of this coming together of people-centric approach, learning from communities, learning from people, building something in a collaborative effort, and then testing it. I mean, we talk about impact, but in many ways you applied it early on and kept testing on impact and improving upon it. And I think we kind of all talk about it in general terms, but you put it into concise terms, how it can be done. And that, if you haven't seen Remission, it's actually a really amazing game. And so, Jean, I've heard you talk about this before also, which is the need for collaboration, the need for technology that can help with collaboration, but also on impact. And what we've just heard from Pat and what they've done with Hope Lab, it just give us a little sense of how you have thought about it from the Case Foundation and the ways you've approached it, I know, with online giving and with the platforms. And I know there's been lessons learned there, too.
Sure. Well, I'm glad Pam walked us through that video game example, because as you know, Sonal, as we were coming into today and we were talking to some folks about the new center, a common question is, social innovation. What does that mean exactly? And sometimes it's hard to describe, and I use a very simple definition, which is finding new ways to solve old problems. And if you heard what Pam said, she and Pierre are two celebrated talents in the world in areas that weren't technically about philanthropy. And what they've managed to do is take their core skills, their core talents, their core passion areas, look at old problems that have daunted us forever. Cancer, for instance. I mean, the work she's done on so many fronts, human trafficking, et cetera, and say, well, what are some new approaches that might break through? So what Sonal is referring to is, as the Case Foundation was coming up on an anniversary, its 15th anniversary, we were asking a lot of questions about what have we done in impact, what's worked and what hasn't, but more importantly, if we really pull back the lens, so we're not just looking at our work now, we're looking at the work of our partners, we're looking at it from a global perspective, and we're actually going back a little bit in time. We hired some folks to go to school on the question, how come sometimes when you set out to do really transformational things, there's breakthroughs? But in many cases, there simply aren't. In the world of philanthropy, we don't have a lot of wins. It's why we so desperately need social innovation. If you think about it, think about the challenges dogging our society today, dogging our world. Many of them have been with us a really long time, and they're not necessarily getting better. So what does that mean? means we've got to change things up. We got to find a new way to approach them. The truly beautiful thing is that we have a generation, many of whom are represented in this room in terms of the student body, who thinks in new ways, who brings new ideas to how to solve old problems. So as we approached our 15th anniversary, we did this sort of look back, look around, if you will, but again, not us looking, asking a third-party firm to take a look at it. They came up with a couple of principles that were always sort of present in things that did break through, and often lacking when there wasn't a breakthrough. And this involved movements, this involved issue areas, et cetera. And it really always started with a big idea. Did someone start with a really big idea? Not accepting incremental change, but really stepping back and saying, what's the big idea here? But the second piece is the piece you were asking about, Sonal, which really is defined as collaboration. We call it reach beyond your bubble. And if you heard Pam say, they involved the people that they were really trying to serve. And I think the biggest surprise to me, coming out of the business world, which was very consumer focused, you'd never set out to do something in a consumer market without listening to the consumers. What does the consumer want? What does the consumer think? But in the world of philanthropy and in sort of social work, if you will, often those voices weren't at the table. It was under fluorescent lights in a conference room where we're talking about them, not with them. And so the second piece really was bring them to the table, reach beyond your bubble, who's not at the table and can either add value or will be affected by the change that you're trying to drive. Experiment early and often, and be willing to accept that failure might be an option. You know, if you're not taking risks, then you're not innovating. And if you're taking risks, there's a chance you may fail. Learn from it, fail fast, fail forward, move on, share your lessons. Those were some of the things that came out of that work that we looked at, really embodied in a campaign called Be Fearless. And the idea of it was, how do we get to more wins in philanthropy versus 15 years from now if we come back together saying, we're not really sure a lot has changed.
Yeah, and you know, I think both of you talked about Be Fearless and both of the approaches that you've taken, whether it's with cancer and how you thought about it from when you were 21 to what you did with Hope Labs. And Jean, I know just looking back over the 15 years and realizing that in order to see the breakthroughs, you had to take that Be Fearless approach. And that's had such an impact, not on me personally, but also on so many people in thinking about how do we think bigger and how do we believe that it's possible to change. But underlying all of that, and I know for both of you, and Pam, I'd like to start with you a little bit, is the sense of what are the strong principles under that, of the values that require that we don't forget about the people, that we don't forget the humility, that how do we make sure that the humanity doesn't get lost? Because sometimes it's easy to think about the big stuff, but forget about the little piece of the humanity. And how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I'm going to cite my colleague Randy Newcomb, who says, you know, our offices, Humanity United and Media Network and Hope Lab shared space in Redwood City, and we used to be on the corner of Broadway and Main. And you know, Randy really likes to say, he's like, it's very different to look at the problems when you're sitting in Broadway and Main versus when you're sitting in someone's tukul in a refugee camp in the Chadian desert. And so for us, actually going to places, to being with the people that we're trying to serve is really important, and to hear from them directly, I think is absolutely important. I know that Humanity United's work in Liberia and helping, you know, working with both civil society in Liberia and also the government of Liberia with President Johnson Sirleaf. We have to be there. We have to show up. You have to accept the chicken from the tribal leader and then leave it with the Carter Center, and because you can't take it on the commercial flight home. It's really powerful. It's really, really important. And or our work at Humanity United in Nepal around the brick kilns, and Pierre was on that trip as well, and it was really great to be able to talk with people and their children who are experiencing being in bonded labor and not living a life that they want for themselves and their families.
Can I just ask just a personal question as a follow-up on that? Like, how do you at the center continue to remember that? Because, I sometimes feel, even personally, it's like sometimes you're so busy talking at conferences and going to places and talking about big issues when you're in rooms, but to constantly remind yourself that this is not about you, but it's about the person that you're serving.
Yeah, I think we worked really hard last year with Pat, Kristen, and the Hope Lab team to create a purpose statement, especially for me, because you notice in your program it says Humanity United and Ulupono and Omidyar Network and Hope Lab, and then it doesn't show you that I'm involved in coral reef research and that's plus involvement with the kids' schools, and so I can spread myself really thin because I really love being an enzyme, like to biology geek here. And so I prioritize going to those places and versus going to conferences or public speaking. And so that I just try to keep on purpose. I'm terrible at it because I love when people are excited about their own passions, and I love to sort of help them catalyze that. But you also don't forget those people. They stay with you, and you want to go back and say, no, I heard you, and I didn't just show up once. I've come back again, and are things better? And this is what we're trying to do, and so that's really important.
And Jean, I know I've been in rooms with you where you're always asking. I was like, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing it for the right purposes? But how do you do that? How are you able to maintain it?
So, I think that we're all informed based on our upbringing, and that, like it or not, as much as we might try and change it in the world, we bring a certain worldview based on what we were exposed to or what our experiences have been or where we sit. I was fortunate enough to kind of be on the front lines of areas when I was growing up, of areas we try to serve today. And that's in me, and nothing's ever going to change that, ever. If I have a waitress serve me, what do you think I'm thinking about, right? That my mother's tips determined the groceries we could buy the next day. So I think we're all informed by whatever experiences we've had. But in our more traditional philanthropy role, what I will say, and we're enormously grateful to an unbelievable team of people, and the honor, Sonal, of having you work with us for the last year and a half as well. But we're really about crowdsourcing. Because do we believe in being out on the front lines? We do. If we're going to invest in an area, we're going to be there, we're going to see it firsthand, and no one does that better than Pam Omidyar. But in our case, we also believe, and you guys have done this in your Prizes and Challenges work as well, there's a great body of thinking, of inspiration, of passion, of good ideas out there in the world. And a big part of what the foundation has tried to do is democratize ideas and democratize access to giving and involvement of the masses. We always thought if it was just us, boy, that's really under-leveraged. But if we could somehow play a small role in collaboration with others in bringing the masses to an issue, to volunteerism, to giving, to bringing us their best ideas about how to solve a big challenge, that's real leverage. And I think that aspect of what we do around crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, everything from micro donations on up, really has informed and animated our work. And I'll give you an example. So we've invested in 3 giving platforms to date. These are online giving platforms in which you can, put your credit card in some cases and make a small donation, in some cases micro donations. And to date, those 3 platforms that we only invested about $4 million in combined total have yielded about $1.5 billion in giving. All of it represented by smaller donations. That's so exciting for us because that is not about us, that is not about our ideas, that is about unleashing the potential out there. And so we're really excited at technology to be an enabler, to lead us to better ways of thinking, to better ideas, to unleash innovation, giving of time and money out across sectors. That just animates our work and we're jazzed by it.
Yeah, and it's amazing because it is about it's citizenship at so many different levels. You know, it's about how can people participate? How can each of us see ourselves as philanthropists, or how can each of us see ourselves as participating in the process? And you know, Pam, it leads me back to this. You and Pierre set up this, the College of Citizenship and Public Trust at Tufts University. And, you know, it's such an important topic. I mean, you know, my title at the White House was civic participation, and it's always about constantly how do you bring people together on this. And what made you do that, and why at a university level? What focused you on that?
Sure. Jean, I think we're completely on the same page about the crowdsourcing.
Sure.
I mean, Media Network is huge fans of Kiva Global Giving. And also, yesterday just read that Donors Choose was named as it's like number 9 of the top 50 most innovative organizations. So I think that's very cool that model is actually playing out really, really well. So. Tufts, the Tisch College of Citizenship and Public Service. Well, it was actually one of our first larger gifts as philanthropists. So Pierre and I went to Tufts, and I was on full scholarship. I was immensely grateful for that opportunity, not just that I got to meet my best friend and husband, but just for the opportunity it provided. And so, you have this label as philanthropist, and you go back to Tufts on campus, and they say, okay, the director of development's with you, and he wants you to meet the president and all this. And, I wasn't used to that. And he started having a conversation about Tufts and really its academic rigor and how wonderful it is. And I tell this story, and we sort of laugh about it now, but John DiBiagio was just really like, if you applied now, Pam, you would not get into Tufts, and and he's probably right. But third generation Tufts grad, and so I was, got accepted and got the scholarship. But
I feel the same way. I don't think I could apply to any college today and get into any of the top ones.
So, but then he was pushing on just how great an academic rigor was, and then said something like, well, your kids might not even get in, and just because you're rich and a legacy. And I said, well, just because I'm rich and a legacy doesn't mean we're going to actually give you a building. What are you going to, what are you going to do I'm sorry, I get a little riled up, right? So what are you going to do to actually show that these kids leave Tufts not entitled, but knowing that they've been given this immense gift of an education? What are they going to do to actually go out and be of service to the world? Which actually goes back to the founding of the university, just similar to Georgetown. And he looked at me and he stopped and he said, let me tell you about the dream that I have for Tufts. And he pulled out Brian O'Connell's book, and Brian was a wonderful long-term professor at Tufts, and it was called Civil Society. And the book's very relevant today. And he said, I want to tell you about this dream. And that's how the College of Citizenship and Public Service really started. It was already the vision within Tufts and within Dr. DiBiagio. So it's been amazing to see then Larry Bacow, the second president after John, and then our current president, Tony Monaco, just really embrace it throughout all the colleges at Tufts.
Yeah.
So.
It's a good, your comments are actually very poignant in the sense of just reminder at the center also to remember why we're here, what we want to do, what it means to the students, and not to forget that providing students the skill sets to be able to go change the world or do the things that they want to do is so critical.
And also, I think Tufts is different. I mean, Georgetown is maybe better suited, but this notion of civic participation and civil service, public service, is actually core to our functioning democracy. And so we must all be engaged at that level. And so what does that mean? So it's nice to see it permeate through multiple departments.
And just a reminder, we're at the launch of the Beck Center. We couldn't be in a better place in the world for the launch of this center. Not only Georgetown's unique role in this town, but what this town brings together. It's really exciting, and I really do believe what I said earlier, which is, 10 years down the road, we're going to look back and we're going to say it became a beacon. And it's not just conversations that are going to happen here, but action and modeling and sharing. And I think that's just really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to open up to questions in just a minute. So I'm going to leave you both with two questions. One, what does social impact and innovation mean to you? And what advice would you give to students as they're going through the process now, in many ways, what you went through, and as they think about their careers and their processes moving forward, their lives moving forward?
You
Start, Jean?
want to take questions first? Or you
I'm
want
going to start
come
with
back
those two questions, and I'll take questions.
Okay, well, I said it pretty clearly. Social innovation to me is really straightforward. New ways to solve old problems. And if, what I talk to our kids about and the students that I love, that I work with in many different places, including here at Georgetown, what are your passions? Follow your passions, and if you have humanity in mind as you go forward in what you do, you will change the world. I think what I love about this generation, when I was growing up, we had to make choices. Were you going to go into business? Were you going to be a social worker? What were you going to do? Were you going to go into government? Today, those walls have come down. This generation says it doesn't work like that anymore. We've got big problems to solve, and we're going to go about doing that. And they want to bring all that they have. When you work with, the Fortune 50 today, the reason is you watch the Super Bowl, some of those ads from companies were about changing the world, is because that's what they have to do today, because thankfully this generation is demanding it. So what I'm very excited by in terms of this generation is you will drive us, whether we try to drive you there or not. You are saying the world works differently now, and I encourage anyone, a new generation today, to say, what do I have that I can bring, whether that's through business, whether that's through government, whether that's through some merge of all these different things I might go do. Thank you.
I'm not sure if I can build on that, with the exception that, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, there's one phrase in their definition of social innovation that I like, which is the process of inventing, securing support for, and implementing novel solutions to social needs and problems. And the notion of securing support for it's not really just fundraising, right? It's the networking of everything to work together. Like you very already get it about this working with all the sectors, and so all of our organizations, public, we have C3, C4, for-profit. I mean, we span it all because we're not doing this for the tax break, right? We're doing this actually for the durable social change, and so that when we leave, the impact is we don't need to be there holding it up. We can leave and it's fixed.
Right.
Yeah. And then what was the second question? Was on
what advice would you like to give to students as they think about their careers and their?
I just think you have to travel. You have to actually experience other people's realities. We didn't get a chance to talk about empathy and compassion, but it's very much, I think it's part of your DNA already, which is so wonderful. But just one quick distinction that we felt was important to make around empathy versus compassion. Empathy is your feeling what the other person is feeling, but compassion, I think, has that action. Has empathy built into it, but there's also an action component. And in order to have that action component, you actually have to understand that you are distinct from that other person's suffering. Otherwise, you actually you go into a period of moral distress and moral outrage, which is, granted, that's how Humanity United was founded in ways, because I just was distressed about that people are enslaved, that people are in mass, violent conflict. And by the way, shout out to Mark Hannes, who I've known for about 10 years now. I think it's short a few months, who was a Swarthmore student who was working on the issue of Darfur, and I just read about him and was so deeply, deeply impressed. So I'm so glad that he's with you now. So
Couldn't agree with you more. He has made my life a ton easier, but he also just is a constant reminder of why we're here, and it constantly does that. Can I just ask one more question of you, which is, what are you most passionate about right now?
I'm actually very, very passionate on issues of social neuroscience and actually the absolute importance of good early childhood development. And I think when we look at issues around childhood neglect and adversity, and then we think about how can we actually cultivate compassion and empathy and good social emotional connections in people. It's not just about the cognitive, it's actually about the whole child. And so that's what I'm really, really passionate about. And I can see it overlaying in all of our organizations. Don't know quite how to really integrate it, but I think it's really important to pay attention to.
Yet another example of social innovation and why there's opportunities to bring different sectors and different perspectives to this table. I'd like to open up to questions really quickly because I know we're running out of time, but if you have questions, if you could just stand up and speak loudly because we don't have mics walking around, that would make it easier. Oh, we do have mics. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll have a mic come to you. And for those that don't have questions, I always have lots of questions. There's one back here.
Thank you, Sonal, and thank you, Jean and Pam. My name's Scott Beal. I'm a Georgetown 98 graduate and run a nonprofit called Atlas Corps, funded by both your foundations. So I just wanted to briefly say, not only thank you for that, but there are a lot of alum that I think would like to contribute meaningfully to this center. And I think this center could also contribute meaningfully to a lot of social entrepreneur alumni as well. So I just wanted to throw in the alumni voice, partially as a thank you, but also as a willingness to contribute and support what I think is a really exciting day as a social entrepreneur and as a Hoya. So thank you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So can I chime in on that? First of all, you guys do great work, which is why I think you get the funding that you do, and thanks for your comment. He said social entrepreneur, and I think we haven't spent enough time in this conversation actually talking about the entrepreneurial spirit, because I think that's behind the center. Pam, you talked about that. You probably did exactly what I did and looked at these words up here. You don't see these words typically in a setting like this. This is an entrepreneurial center that's being kicked off today. And I think it's a great idea to invite alumni back and have them play an active role and bring that entrepreneurial spirit to help make it all it can be.
Absolutely. And we'll be calling on you. Right back here.
Hi. Well, I'm a neuroscientist, and I spent 10 years looking at brain plasticity. I was at the University of Rochester, but my thesis director is now the director of the Neuroimaging Center here at Georgetown. So something is happening here in neuroplasticity in the area that you're talking about. So I devote my social enterprise in helping people use their brain to follow their heart and secure jobs that are well-paying jobs that change the world. We're in 37 universities, not yet, at Georgetown. That will change soon. And my question for you is, you mentioned students have to understand for-profit, non-profit solutions to all problems and understand their skills in that sense. What are you seeing in the ecosystem of benefit corporation, L3Cs, for impact type of organizations, and the PRI space that I know both of you are starting to grow in? Would love your insights on that.
So, impact investing.
Yeah, so let me ask you both of you these questions. I'm happy to answer it, but I'd also like to hear, because Pam, when you all set Omidyar Network up, it's for-profit and nonprofit. You didn't decide to take a perspective. You said any tool, any of the ways that we can have those tools to do that. And Jean, I know you've been working on this from the impact investing perspective, but I'd love to why did you think about it that way? Like, why did you not just say, we're going to create a for-profit or we're going to create a nonprofit? Like, how did you think about it when you set up Omidyar Network and many of the other entities that you've been working on?
Well, I think it's because there's immense social good that can come from business too, and again, it goes to the intentionality. Yeah. And how do we create a world where businesses succeed, people do well, the environment doesn't suffer and is replenishable where needed, and so we just have to be very explicit and intentional about that. But we, like I said earlier, we really felt we wanted it to be about the social change, not just limit ourselves by the constraints of a 501c3. So,
yeah. Jean, I know I've been working with you on impact investing for a couple of years, and I know you've been thinking about this.
So I think probably if you're here today, you're familiar with this term impact investing, but the idea of it is companies that will change the world that are pursuing more than just a return on profits, but are also pursuing a social return in their core focus. And it is something we've been working on. But the larger question around nonprofit business and how structures were set up, et cetera, for me, I think about it as just having all the oars in the water. Why, if you're trying to address something, would you leave some oars in the boat? So for us, if we have our investment dollars working, our private investment dollars, if we have the foundation doing some things, if we're using our active networks to draw more people in, our voice, our partnership, that's kind of all the oars in the water. And it's called kind of a blended approach, if you will, where you don't really have these, you have to have some Chinese walls from a governance and tax standpoint between the foundation and other things, but there's nothing stopping you from bringing everything to an issue or an initiative or something that you care passionately about.
And my answer to your question would be slightly in the sense that I think in many ways we've divided these sectors so specifically. So one, it has to be a for-profit, one has to be a nonprofit, and they're really just tax-regulated entities.
Exactly right.
And rather than thinking about it from a tax-regulated entity perspective, how do we think about it from a solution perspective that we can bring for-profit or nonprofit to the table? That's what we're seeing with B Corps. That's what we're seeing with L3Cs. But it also brings that intentionality back in, which is if you do it with intent and you're willing to measure that intent of yourself and the entity that you're in, it's actually pretty important. And the excitement to me of those entities coming together and that question coming together is that we're beginning to break these barriers that we have to see everything in specific silos. Mm-hmm. And frankly, that's where the university is valuable, to think about how do you break down those silos and how do we think about addressing these differently, not just from one perspective or another. So that's exactly why I think we exist, but that's exactly what Georgetown would aim to do. Other questions? Yep, back here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sheyu Noyewale, a senior in the School of Foreign Service here at Georgetown. Ardent supporter of entrepreneurship and social innovation. And I've been afforded the experience to see different communities of startups. And one thing that I have noticed is that the demographic of innovators isn't as diversified as it should be. Seeing that there are a lot of community or people from communities that really do need social innovation, and they're kind of like cut out of that community. So I was wondering, do you guys have any suggestions or insight for the university so that the Beck Center can be a place for diversity of thought, inclusiveness between the diverse demographic here at Georgetown?
Great question. Do you want to take it? I'm happy to go. I'm happy to start. I think, first of all, your point is so well taken, and I think it's something that we think about all the time. My first and greatest suggestion and request of you is help us think about how we do that more effectively. But it is, I think, where Pam and Jean started, is we have to start with where the community is first and think about solutions from their perspectives, because if we start thinking about it from a university perspective or just from a philanthropy perspective or a donor perspective, we're not going to get to the place where we need to get to, which is where are the communities in which we need to work in. And let their voices come with us and help them think about how do we craft and give voice to their solutions. So it's why we want as many communities and as many organizations to partner with us as possible, because it's not just about what the center does, but it's about how we can engage in the communities here and around the world on that. But I'd urge you to stay involved with us, because I think that's actually really important, because it's how we're going to continue to remember that we're keeping our customer in mind. But that's a great question. Thank you. Back there. Can you stand up? We can't see you, sorry. It's coming.
Thanks. Jeremy Pesner, recent alum of the master's program. So I'm very excited to see all of this, but I'm very interested to hear, a lot of social innovation tends to be associated with entrepreneurship, but there's more than several different ways that social innovation can really come about. I'd be interested to hear from your perspective on what we can do when talking about entrepreneurship or bridge building, or from stakeholders who aren't necessarily interested in developing a business, who bring other sorts of strengths to the table that is outside this, what could be considered the normal view of social innovation.
Jean, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I can give you an example of something that I think has taken place in our town, which actually was a public sector thing, which is bike share. You know, that really is social innovation. That's taking cars off the road, and that's providing you know, more environmentally friendly transportation to the masses. So I think if we've suggested that the only way you have social innovation is to be a startup, whether that startup is for-profit or nonprofit, I don't think that's true. In fact, I think the reason I think the Beck Center will be a beacon is because I think government is pretty good at looking at what the private sector has done and leveraging it some way to do new things if it's in partnership with the private sector. And we've seen this play out in a number of different ways. And I think the Beck Center can become almost a petri dish, if you will, to put a spotlight on some of the innovations that are happening that the public sector can adopt, that the corporate sector can adopt, or startups can be created to go address. So my own view of social innovation does not require it to be a new startup, but I do think it requires entrepreneurial thinking. And there's a lot of work being done in really big old companies like GE and IBM that are responding well to more of an entrepreneurial spirit in the way that they innovate as companies. So they're not startups, but they're entrepreneurial in their spirit.
And Pam, I know through Hope Lab and through Humanity United and through many of the other initiatives, you don't just take it from a perspective of it has to be a new organization, but you've supported existing organizations as they try to adapt new approaches too.
Sure, absolutely. I think, you know, when you think about innovation, it's interesting, whether it's a product or a process, are you actually creating it to disrupt the current system? And then, you know, kind of in the Buckminster Fuller thing, you know, build another system and people will come over. Or are you actually creating the innovation to help fix, let's say, a market failure in an existing system? And so I think, so looking at it in different ways. And so what I worry about is when you have maybe a large system or institution and they say, we're innovative, but that really means that they're just right here and then the rest of them are, the rest of the organization is not there. I mean, maybe that's their pilot, or the other thing is sometimes very large institutions will say, yeah, we're doing this innovative thing here, but their whole system actually needs mass fixing. You know, it's not a Band-Aid that you, innovation's not just a Band-Aid that you put on it, so.
Absolutely, and I think I would, you know, to both of your points, and to just elevate on that. Having worked in the government, I think it's about systemic change and systematic change, not just one place there's an innovation, but how do we think about that innovation crossing across multiple boundaries and not stopping because we had one success somewhere, but thinking about what's the next synapse that needs to be hit.
Yeah, and in order to really change a system, you know, systems really want to sort of keep the status quo. Yeah. They really want to stay. So when you move a lever here, the whole system works to counteract that. But when you're working in multiple levers in that system, then you can start to get that change.
Exactly. That's perfect. Other questions right here? Well, we got two back there. Okay, start right there where you are. Perfect.
Hi, my name is Diane. I'm an alum of Georgetown, and I currently work here with a program that also helps to promote young leaders in Latin America to have a social impact. I like to think of myself as well as an enzyme and kind of being a catalyst for others that want to make social change. So I'd like to ask both of you, from your experience in foundations, what do you think is the most effective thing that you can do in supporting young people that have these big ideas as being that enzyme?
You know, that's a great question, because when you set up a foundation, and you know, you'd like to think you're small and entrepreneurial in itself, but then you start creating structures around it, and then your grants start getting much bigger, and sometimes that leaves out the sort of the nascent, the person with the amazing idea that just doesn't kind of know how to start. So, you know, I think there's such a good role, and I think Silicon Valley does it well. And even, I think, probably on this coast as well, and these incubators, and really help people to, I'm thinking of actually like Richard Branson's School of Entrepreneurship in Johannesburg, and now there's a sort of a satellite office in Monrovia in Liberia, where that's actually helping individuals who want to do this, and giving them skills and capacity, and sharing ideas with each other. And there's a lot of examples for that here at Georgetown and elsewhere. So
Yeah, that's great. Great point. Jean, I know
Yeah,
you've
I
thought about this
described
before.
briefly earlier, I mean, some of our work around crowdsourcing great ideas and prizes and challenges allow great ideas to bubble up and great leaders to bubble up. And we will be quick to put a spotlight on them, back them, et cetera, as we do these different prizes and challenges, as many other organizations like Pam does as well. The other thing is, you know, we take very seriously our work with young people. It's part of the reason I'm spending time here at Georgetown. So some of it is sort of more, as Pam describes, process up here through programmatic stuff that we do. And then some of it is truly high touch relationship, mentoring.
And I think it's just also important, and I thought it was such a great question. It's also important that, you know, I know they personally both actually talk to many people, and many people have been touched in their orbits and the many things that they have done, and they've reached out and been mentors. And it's not just about finding mentors, but also remembering that we also mentor along the way. So don't always just be looking up, but make sure you're looking across and thinking about how do I mentor the next person who's going to need the help, and not forget that we all kind of came at this together, and there were many people around us that helped us too. So I also say to you, I know you just graduated, but don't forget the mentorship that the next generation is going to need from you as they're students now, and they will truly appreciate what you have to offer. There was another question right here.
Hi, Ben Powell, MSFS, class of 2000. You have a really unique perspective from where you sit. And my question has to do with what some of the real barriers to accelerating social innovation that you see, in particular around culture. And I would just ask, what do you think we need to change about ourselves to accelerate social innovation?
that's a great question.
Fear is probably the single greatest barrier in institutions and even with individuals who fear what it'll do to the reputation if they fail, who fear, you know, what might happen to this over there if they do that, et cetera. And, you know, I talked about our work in Be Fearless. We are a very risk-tolerant organization, largely because we're what's called living donors, meaning it's our money. When you're in charge of someone else's money, the whole risk tolerance changes, okay? You're less risk tolerant. I would be if tomorrow someone gave me their money to manage. But even with us being really far out on the risk tolerance, when we put Be Fearless on the table, and then we said, okay, well now let's look at our own work, and when we make decisions, unpack the decision and say, well, why did we say no to this? And I was surprised how many times we were caught up in sort of some fear thinking, basically, that would stop us from doing things. And I wouldn't have predicted that. I would have said, no, that's not really us. We're fine. We're really happy to be out there. So I figure, okay, if it happens to us and we're super risk tolerant and it's our own money, then probably to institutions and individuals everywhere, it's a real issue. So, you know, I'm not about crazy risk, but I think, well, sometimes I am. No, but I think measured risk is something that should be discussed. And if you're going to innovate, you're going to have to try new things, and that means risk.
I think your point about culture and shifting mindsets, I know, so Catherine Chen is in the audience, and she's part of the Humanity United team, and is amazing on our work with human trafficking. And so when Randy and I first started looking at investing in the field of human trafficking, we had this pot of money and we said, okay, who are the potential grantees? And we realized that if we were to invest that the first year, that we would have basically doubled the revenue of the top 10 anti-slavery organizations in the world. And so that would skew the system. And so we actually needed to work with them to build capacity as well, and also to align interests. So you'd think that people working to end slavery would be a bit more cooperative. But it's like when you have a scarcity of resources, or it's a perceived scarcity of resources, they were actually competing with each other for those resources. So then you're less likely to work together. And no, this is an amazing group of individuals, you know, and and clearly wanting to eliminate modern-day slavery and forced labor. But we actually had to align incentives, and what we did was create this group called ATTEST, was this Alliance to End Trafficking, Slavery and Trafficking, and it was policy-oriented, right? So that they had a greater collective voice together. But we actually also invested in each of their organizations as well, and then worked to align them towards this much bigger vision. And Catherine and the HU team, I just heard back from the Partnership from Freedom finalists, or 10 finalists. It was a partnership with, Catherine, is it the White House or USAID? But Justice Department. But with the U.S. government, and I got an email back from one of the finalists who's actually based in Hawaii, and she said that what was so amazing was the culture shift that was ongoing. It was all of us in together, moving forward, and so I think that when we talk about networking and aligning, that's what we're talking about is across sectors, all of us moving forward with the same big vision.
It's a great place for us to really want to thank you both for coming here today. Now you know why we wanted Pam and Jean. Incredible just thinkers, but they've been thinking about this for a long time. So please help me in thanking them. This is just the beginning of our conversations. This is the beginning of igniting your own thinking on how to think about social impact and social innovation. We're going to take a 15-minute break. We have Salim Ismail, who's going to talk about how technology is disrupting change and how we need to reorganize ourselves for that. And then we have 2 amazing workshops, one on design thinking and one on storytelling, both of which are critical in the skill sets of social innovation. But thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being a part of this launch. Thank you, President DeGioia. Thank you, Vice President Groves. Thank you, Father O'Brien, for starting the day with us. And thank you to the Becks.
So the first part of the conversation was to talk to you pretty much about the Center for Social Impact and Innovation, why we're here, the purpose of why we want to get started. A little bit you get to hear from both Pam and from Jean as to how they got involved and why they're passionate about it and what it means, not only for the DC community, but what it means for, in general, for Georgetown, and why it's important that this conversation be taking place at a university. This is leading to our next speaker, who, for me, and it's very personal and a personal friend, but someone who I have admired for a very long time. Listening to him bring all of these ideas together in a very fundamental way of how to think about systems change, which is what we talked about a little earlier, thinking about systemically, how do we think about making change and how do we push that change to happen. So Salim is a friend, a colleague, a visionary, and he's the co-founder of Singularity University. For those that have not been to Singularity, I urge you to go and try to visit in California. It's based at Ames Research Center in Northern California, but in South Bay, right? Silicon Valley, but it's at NASA. So just put those 2 together, Silicon Valley, NASA, big problems being solved. That's what Salim's been working on for quite a while. He's also the founder of Brick House, which was the incubator within Yahoo. And as we were talking about how to build innovative ideas within institutions, that's what Salim was doing. But he's also done, he started companies, sold companies. But more than that, I think what's amazing about Salim is he's a big picture thinker. He's really thinking about how to make change happen. How do institutions think about making change? And how do you manage and lead through disruption? So with that, I hope you're as excited as I am. I've only heard Salim speak on video, so now I get to actually watch him live in person, talk about how he thinks about universities and how they can lead us through change, and especially with the disruptions that are taking place. So please help me in welcoming Salim Ismail.
What Sonal didn't tell you is that through a twist of karmic mischief, we were actually roommates while she was doing Google.org and I was building out Yahoo's incubator. And we talked about entrepreneurship a little bit earlier. We have some stories that we could share, but probably for another time. When we talked about entrepreneurship, and one of the issues that we have when we are dealing with systemic change, as Jean and Pam mentioned, is that often the existing systems don't like those types of changes. And if you're involved in disruptive innovation in an existing system, the immune system of that organization or that system will come and kill you, right? And because it's built to withstand change and withstand risk. And that's how all of our organizations are built. And what we're seeing today is a very profound shift in what's happening in the world. And I'm going to talk through a little bit of what we're seeing out in the world and fundamentally why I'm so excited about this particular center. So first of all, thank you to the Becks for creating this and doing this. And incredible thank you for Georgetown. And most of all to Sonal for putting this as a centerpiece for where she goes next. We've all been, I think, watching her to see where does she go next, what will she do? And I can't imagine a better role for her and frankly for Georgetown in terms of how we do this. So how many of you have some familiarity or Singularity University? Can I just see a show of hands? Okay, so some of you. Right, so we're not really about the singularity, we're not really a university. So we're a bit of a funky animal. We run courses on leveraging accelerating technologies to make a massive impact on the world. Every summer we bring together 80 students that come from 40 different countries. Average age is about 30 years old. It's a postgraduate program. For half the summer we deliver about 300 hours of lectures, labs, and workshops on what is the future of accelerating technologies. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. The second half of the summer we turn into an incubator. And we're kind of 1/3 academic institution, 1 part think tank, 1 part incubator. And for the second half of the summer, we challenge our students to leverage accelerations that we're seeing in technology. And how would you impact 1 billion people within 10 years? Go launch a project, go launch a business, go launch a nonprofit that would do that. We spin out about 10 or so startups a year, and we've done now about 50 or 60 in our 5-year history. We're seeing, we've managed to attract many of the leading thinkers in the world that come and teach. Vince Cerf, who created the IP address system, Craig Venter, who sequenced the first human genome, Dean Kamen, whose slingshot machine may single-handedly solve the clean water problem around the world. And they come because all of them at the edges of their field are seeing enormous disruption. And we're at an inflection point in humanity where how we've managed ourselves over the last few hundred years or so is completely different from how the world goes going forward, right? And there's kind of 4 big impacts of this. The first is that we're digitizing the world. We had about 10 years ago maybe 400 million connected devices to the internet. Today we have 8 to 9 billion connected devices. By 2020 we're going to have 50 billion connected devices. And a few years after that we're going to 1 trillion. Right? So think about that one metric. We're at about 8 to 9 billion today, going to 1 trillion within a couple of decades. We think we're 30, 40 years into the information revolution. On that metric, we're about 1% of the way there. We're literally just starting. Note that we're living in a digital world. All our memories aren't in our heads anymore. They're in our smartphones. Right? All of our relationships are digital, not analog. And something profound happens when you move to this digital world. And I'll give you an example of this. Some of you are old enough in this room to remember film photography, right? You pay about $1 a photograph for the processing for the film, and you operate from a scarcity model. You can only carry so much film around. You frame every shot carefully. We take courses on how to do photography, and it's expensive, so we manage it very carefully. When you shift from a material substrate to an information substrate, and you take a digital photograph, a couple of interesting things happen. The first is the marginal cost of an extra photograph goes to 0. Right? Now you can take 1 billion photographs, and we do. And now you have a whole set of other problems that you have to think about. Where did I put them? How many different copies do I have across all my different devices? Who did I share them? Are they too public? Did I share them with the right people? How do I get this set across to my parents who don't really know how to use the device? All of these other issues. And we have a filter problem. And how do you manage that abundance? So when you go from this material substrate to this digital substrate, we go from scarcity to abundance. And the domain explodes. In the late 90s, there were maybe 4 billion photographs taken a year of film photography. Today, we have 500 million photographs uploaded a day to Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, et cetera, right? So this is a profound explosion in the domain that takes place. That shift that same type of paradigm shift is what we're seeing across a whole set of technologies. Many of you are familiar with Moore's law, the idea that the price per performance of computation doubles every 18 months. We're seeing that phenomenon now operate across a whole series of other technologies. Computation has been operating under this paradigm for 50, 60 years. The original circuit boards had 200 chips on them, and now we have teraflops of computing on the same physical space. The smartphone that's in your pocket has more computational power in it than the entire US government had 25 years ago. Right? That's a profound statement. We've seen about 40% a year annual increase in desktop computing speeds over the last 30, 40 years. If we'd increase the top speed of a car at that same 30, 40%, a car today will go faster than the speed of light. To give you some sense of what you have. And so how can you harness this capability? How can you harness this as we digitize the world and we make everything accessible via computation? How do we think about that? And now we're seeing that demonstration and that shift and that explosion happen in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in biotech, in neuroscience, via imaging, in energy even. Solar energy is on an exponential curve. We predict that within 20 to 22 years, we'll have 100% world energy supply by solar. That will have some interesting geopolitical consequences. What will we fight wars over? All sorts of kind of crazy consequences come about, right? And nobody sees this because all of our structures and all of our education teaches us to think linearly. If I take 30 linear steps, I'll get out to the other side of the balcony, and you're pretty good at calculating where would I be a third of the way or 2/3 of the way in that progression. We're very good at that linear extrapolation. But the exponential curve, if I take 30 doubling steps, 2, 4, 8, 16, at step 30, I'm at 1 billion. I'm 26 times around the world, right? And it's very hard to gauge where am I a third of the way or 2/3 of the way in that progression. And when we go from that material world to the digital world, we enter this exponential growth path. And now all of these technologies are moving along that path. And nobody predicts how quickly we go down that line. We had 12 years ago 100 million mobile phones in the world. And now we have 5.5 billion. Vinod Khosla, the noted venture capitalist, founder of Sun Microsystems, did an analysis, and he went back to 2002, 2004, 2006, 2008, and he looked at what did the expert analysts in the mobile phone world predict would be the growth of mobile phones at every point in time, because they doubled every 2 years over the last 12 years. And in 2002, he looked at Gartner, Forrester, Jupiter, McKinsey's, et cetera, and he found that they predicted 16% annual growth in that industry. 2 years later, it had gone up 100%. So they were off by a factor of 3 or so. And in 2004, they predicted 14%. Then 2 years later, it doubled again. And in 2006, they predicted 12% would be the growth. And then it doubled again. And in 2008, unable to grok the fact that we've had 3 doubling patterns in the previous 3 time periods, the collective prediction was 10%. Right? And then it doubled again. So you went from their prediction was 10%, you had 100% growth. Now, how much more wrong can you be from 10% to 100%? And you're the mobile phone industry expert, right? And this is where we see this gap. We are not able to predict this. And what we do in our programs is try and teach people to spot these doubling patterns. Because if you can see them and you can ride that wave, it's the biggest lever that we have in the world today. And maybe the biggest lever that we've had in society ever. Just take biotechnology. 12 years ago, it cost $2.7 billion to sequence the first human genome. 12-year project, lots of different parties working on it. The second one cost about $400 million to do. Third one was about $50 million. Fourth one was about $14 million. Anybody know what it is today? $1,000. We've gone from $2.7 billion 12 years ago to $1,000 today. If you're building a business, how do you do it if your price point is changing an order of magnitude a year? Right? But in 2 years, it'll be $100, and by the end of the decade, we predict that it'll cost a penny. It'll be cheaper to sequence your genome than it will be to flush your toilet. Right? And we flush the toilet, we'll probably sequence everything that goes through there. And so this extraordinary explosion of capability, this extraordinary drop in price is what we're seeing across all of these. The $20 helicopters that you see all the kids playing with today, 4 years ago, that capability cost $700. And 8 years ago, it wasn't possible. So it simply wasn't possible to do that level of miniaturization, servo motors, stabilizers, et cetera. And then 4 years ago, $700, and now $20. And when something costs $20, it means that many more people can innovate and do interesting things with it. And the final part of this equation that we're most excited about is the sheer democratization of these technologies. A 3D printer is now accessible to a lot more people than it was 5 years ago. In a few years, we'll all have access to that. Right? What happens if you use a microfinance model and distribute 3D printers around favelas in Brazil or the slums in Asia? Some magical and unexpected things will happen as we do that. And how can we harness this pace of change? And the problem that we've got, and partly why I'm excited about being here today and seeing the creation of the center, is that our societal structures are not set up for this. I'm going to play you a little clip. This is a little audio clip of what it's like. How many of you are familiar with the Google car? Right, quite a few of you, right? So the Google car is an autonomous car. It's now done 1 million kilometers on California highways and streets without an accident. 1 million. It will be prime time and ready for battle in about 3 to 4 years. We'll start seeing mainstream action from this car. And it may be the biggest change in society we see in our lifetimes, just the introduction of this one technology. Right? Because you don't need artificial human intelligence to drive a car. You need artificial horse intelligence. And we can't have that now. And the sensors in the car doesn't drink or drive, it doesn't fall asleep. And also it mostly doesn't drink and drive. And so really we're going to see some interesting things happen as people get excited about not having to drive their kids to school and doing other things with the car. We waste 6% of GDP doing this in traffic, 50 billion hours a year stuck in traffic. What happens when you release that to the general economy? We spend $2.5 billion just on traffic accidents. That's the cost of traffic accidents to the GDP. Right? And so this car will reduce 95% of that because most of these accidents are human-related. A couple of years ago, there was a 3-day BlackBerry data outage around the world. Nobody could send BlackBerry text messages for about 3 days. The accident rate in Abu Dhabi during that 3-day period dropped 40%. If you want a fundamental statistic that human beings shouldn't drive. So let me give you this sense of it. We live in a world where we will look back on this time and we will wonder, why did we ever let human beings drive? Right? That's how we will look back at the world. Now, how different is that from how we think about the world today? And that disruption, that gap, that switch is what we're seeing across all of these technologies, now leaching into all sorts of other industries and so on. We've seen industry-level disruption thus far by information and by this digital world. The music business, the electronic publishing world, the newspaper business, all decimated. And huge deflationary dynamics, by the way, about a 10x drop in revenues whenever we information enable it. Now we're starting to see macroeconomic implications. I mentioned 3D printing. We'll all have access to one in a few years. If you think about the Chinese economy, the foundation of the Chinese economy is essentially assembling and shipping cheap plastic parts. Right? What happens to their economy when we can essentially make most of that stuff at home? The Indian economy, the big chunk of it is call centers. And we're automating that using artificial intelligence. And within 3 to 4 years, those will all be under severe threat. And so now we're going to start to see macroeconomic implications of this. And from a societal perspective, from a leadership perspective, we are simply not ready for this pace of change. If you think about all of the mechanisms we use to run the world, our politics, our civics, our legal systems, healthcare system, education, intellectual property, all designed for a world a few hundred years ago, not for the world of today. Right? And we need to re-architect all of those instruments, all of those societal structures. We focus on high-speed technologies. And because we're focused on such fast-moving technologies, we have to update our curriculum every 2 months. Every 2 months, we convene our entire faculty and we revisit every lecture because the fields that we're dealing with, robotics, biotech, et cetera. In biotech, we've had 4 major breakthroughs just in the last year. So we've had to develop almost a near real-time curriculum development process to keep pace with that pace of change. And it causes us an interesting problem. Even though we have the top researchers, thought leaders, scientists in the world coming to teach, we can't become an official, accredited, state-sanctioned university because to do that, you have to fix your curriculum and not change it. Right? And it brings about the structural question of how does any regulatory framework keep pace as technology is accelerating away from us? We've simply never seen. And in fact, in higher education, it's worse. If you're doing, say, a master's degree in one of these areas that we're studying, neuroscience or advanced robotics or biotech, by the time you finish your master's degree, you're out of date. And we've just never seen that before. Actually, we've seen it in the web development world, where if you're not updating your skills as a web developer almost annually, you get out of date very quickly. Now we're seeing it across all of these fields. And so how do we think about our educational systems in this new world? And so this is why leadership becomes quite important, because our society cannot handle this pace of change. I'm going to play for you this little clip. This is the clip of what it's like to ride in the Google car. right? So when you get into this car, and this clip is from somebody getting into the car, and it's taking off down an obstacle course, and this is his reaction. Can we play the little clip? There's a little swearing in this, just sorry about that. It's YouTube. Sorry.
Holy shit. There's no fucking hands on that wheel.
Apologies.
What?
Right. So that scream, the scream was what I wanted you to hear. That's the visceral scream of humanity meeting advanced technology. Okay? When you get into that car for the first time and it goes off at that speed, you freak out. There's nobody in the driver's seat, right? And that's the reaction, right? Now, after about riding in about 10 minutes, it's like getting into an elevator. You press a button, it goes where you want to go. But the first reaction is a freak out reaction. What we're seeing around the world today is governments and countries and societies around the world freaking out because of this information access. The Arab Spring is a manifestation of that. The younger generation is leveraging information in a way that the older generation can't even conceive of. Over here, we're reacting dramatically with Edward Snowden and with Aaron Schwartz and completely overreacting in how we deal with it because we can't govern. There's so much information accessibility, it's almost impossible to govern the country. We've been showing a photograph of the US Constitution with the right to privacy, the Fourth Amendment scratched out. We've been showing that image for about 5 years since our founding, saying, look, technology is heading this way. Now we're there. Right? A fundamental pillar of American society has disappeared with no public discourse about it. And how do you update the Constitution, which is the software that runs the country? How do you update that in this environment? I'm Canadian, I don't have an expectation of privacy anyway, but if you're American, it's a pretty bad place to be. Okay? And so this is a big structural issue. This is a fundamental pillar and gone. And so how will we deal with this? And this is why leadership becomes more and more critical. We don't spot these exponential technologies. They kind of double away for a while, and then all hell breaks loose once they hit the knee of the curve and they take off according to that doubling pattern. And then we look at it and we say, oh, black swan. Right? In fact, you could call us Black Swan University. We're trying to train people to watch for these disruptions and harness that pace of change. And so this is the fundamental question in front of us as we enter this digitized world, which is not slowing down. This is another function, I think, that's the most important part of these. We've noticed, and this was Ray Kurzweil's most profound observation, is once you start that doubling pattern and a technology becomes information-enabled and starts doubling every year to 2 years, nothing shakes it off that path. It stays on that path. So in computation, we've gone through vacuum tubes and mechanical relays and transistors, now integrated circuits. We're actually reaching the end of the S-curve of the capacity and capability of integrated circuits. But now quantum computing is coming online. And we seem to be that curve seems to be continuing. And typically with anything quantum, it seems to work, nobody knows quite how. And it needs a fair bit of alcohol to discuss, so I won't get heavily into that. But this curve seems to be continuing. And as that curve goes and we digitize everything, that pace of change is continuing much faster than our ability to deal with it. And I think this is how I would encourage you to think about this new world in this way in 3 particular ways. One, society is fundamentally not working in this new world, in this new model. We have to re-architect every one of our institutions to think about this. Take intellectual property. High-tech companies are now spending more on patent litigation than on R&D. It's a pretty bad place to be from a societal perspective, right? And I could go on in education, I could go on in policy. Sonal made a fantastic point to me. We make all of our policy reactively and defensively. We need to start making policy proactively and anticipating where things are going to go. Because we can see it. We can actually see what's going to happen in the next few years. And so this is how I think about that part of it, that societal aspect. The second part is, and maybe that's the most inspiring part for us, and because we're actually fundamentally optimistic about where things go, and we're very optimistic about technology, you might guess that by the end of this discussion, is that because of the sheer democratization, we have at our hands the tools to do something profound. We have open space, biotech, hackerspace, where you can go and synthesize DNA and make all sorts of new life forms, which has moral implications, again, going back to the leadership question. We have drones that we can use for interesting things. One of our companies is using drones to move medicine and food around developing countries where there are no roads. And their idea is in the same way that Africa, say, leapfrogged the whole wireline generation and went straight to wireless and telephony, why not do that in transportation? because it'll require about $1 trillion of road infrastructure, which they're not really going to have. And so why not bypass that completely? And the opportunity exists for many developing countries to leapfrog the Western world and implement a whole new world that we've never seen before in a very new, exciting way, with all, with all of the requisite challenges and stresses that brings, right? And so can we be bold? Wow, that was loud. Talk about technology. Can we be bold about how we think about that new world and leadership? And talking about impact, there's no bigger lever that we have than these technologies that are moving so fast. We have to use them with care. And this is one of the reasons we exist, is that we're dealing with technologies today that are billions of times more powerful than even 20 years ago. Somebody can accidentally create a synthetic virus, and that could cause a huge amount of damage. And that's inadvertent. Forget the deliberate malfeasance that could be caused by somebody as a bad actor leveraging these technologies. And so we have to think about that from a perspective. We've had the fairly senior people from the security services come through our programs, and they're wondering about how the heck do you deal with the bioterrorism threat where somebody can manufacture a virus in their bedrooms today because the technology exists at that level. How do we deal with that? And so enormous challenges ahead of us, but enormous optimism. Let me close with a couple of examples of how people are leveraging this in a very profound way. One of our alumni in Argentina, his name is Emiliano Cargiman, is launching a cluster of low Earth nanosatellites, about this big, up into space. When fully deployed, his cluster of satellites will be able to provide real-time video anywhere on Earth to a 1-meter resolution. His first 2 satellites have already launched. So what does that mean for crop management, asset security, parking spot management in New York? I know Washington doesn't have a parking problem, but, and so this has some interest, and he's going to launch an app store along with it, so anybody can build an app to leverage that capability. And he's been voted by our faculty the most likely to actually impact 1 billion people. Right? There's a couple of our alumni working down in San Diego. They're working on a lab where they've continued the work of William Pollack, who solved the Rh-negative problem to cure for mother-fetus blood incompatibility. And they've progressed that research, and they have a working cure for superbugs, for which we don't have an antibiotic solution, and maybe one of the biggest health threats in the world today. And they have a working cure for superbugs. The step 2 in their world is they are able to cure all allergies. And this is a 10-person lab working out of a small operation in Southern California. And so this is what's magical for us today, that an individual working on their own or with a small team can actually impact 1 billion people. We couldn't think of it that way before. And that's the opportunity of that. And so something that we're excited about as we churn out people that are practiced in these technologies, we have to give them some guidance over how to think about public-private partnerships, how to think about the role of society, how to think about social innovation, how to think about entrepreneurship, how to think about impact. How do you measure these? How do you do this in an ethical and a responsible way? And this is where I think the key element of the final piece of the puzzle is really the university system. Our model of the university is about 400 years old in its current state. It's really time for an upgrade. And really, I think we need to think about universities as taking steps to impact and forge a path forward for where society goes. There is no other institution that's able to do it. Government is too backward-looking and short-term thinking. Think tanks are usually too purpose-driven. Universities are the one place where you have academic freedom of thought, the ability to experiment, and a place where you can test these different ideas, different solutions, where young people can forge their thinking at the proper age and then unleash that out to the world. And I think that's the exciting part for us. So for where we are in the world, sitting in Silicon Valley, looking at these fast-moving technologies, and the collective response when people come to our programs is, excuse my language, but they go, holy shit, how are we going to handle all this? And we simply don't know. We do see it coming. We're kind of curating all of these breakthroughs across all of these different technologies. Just in neuroscience, there's a team in Japan working on brain scanning where they can actually trap your images coming off your visual cortex while you're asleep. And they're literally recording your dreams. The aim is to play it back to you the next day, which might be a little freaky, right? And so just think about that one development, right? Are we ready for that? No. Do we want that? Not sure. But it's going to happen? It's going to happen, right? And so how will we deal with that? What if your spouse or best friend puts a recorder next to your image while you're asleep? So we have to think about these areas. And frankly, us alone, we're seeing the technologies happen, but with it comes the need for the requisite leadership and how to harness this for society in an appropriate way. So I wanted to give you some glimpse of the power and capability available to us with the negative side as well, because the negative side is as powerful as the positive. But if we can harness these technologies positively, we can make the biggest impact in the world today. We have an example of the scarcity to abundance model, which is the internet. With the internet, we have an abundance of information. And we have, for the first time, access to the world's information across the globe. And everybody and anybody has access to that information. It's caused an enormous democratization. We can see old power structures, and we see this paradigm playing out. Hollywood tried to launch the SOPA bill to literally arbitrarily shut down a website that they deemed inappropriate. The entire internet community fought back. And so we're seeing this kind of battle between top-down old hierarchical structures and bottom-up participatory, nurturing, cross-linking environments, which I think is where the future goes. We have to think about how we create those structures for the betterment of society. So with that, I just want to congratulate Sonal. Thank you to the Becks for creating this incredible institution. And to think about how do you take impact, social thinking, innovation, bring it all together with the use of technology and entrepreneurship to really change the world for a better place. And I can't think of a better place for that to happen. So thank you very much for your time.
If you want to indulge me, if you have any questions for him, because that, to me, is probably one of the most powerful talks in terms of really thinking about what change is coming and how to think about change. So, Salim, if you don't mind taking a few questions, I'd love to. Questions? One right here. Laura, you want to stand up? There's a mic coming right to you.
Thank you. Thanks for your talk. My name is Lorelei Kelly. I've been at the Open Technology Institute at the New America Foundation. For the last couple of years, I've been examining how we could re-engineer the information management system of Congress by decentralizing it. It's very possible today, not because of the technology as much as because of rules changes inside that have mandated transparency. This is everything from machine-readable formats for all documents to real-time hearings, webcasts. I've been talking to a lot of land-grant schools, especially about sort of reinventing the role of sort of the cooperative extension or as a knowledge resource, as a collective knowledge resource for the functional purposes of Congress, because it just absolutely doesn't do this piece of the oversight process anymore.
Right.
Do you think that's something, I mean, have you seen schools that might pick this up as sort of the modern version of the land grant?
We're going through that tension today. I mean, a lot of elected officials, and you need some level of secrecy to be able to have discussions and confidence to figure out your position on something, right? On the other hand, society wants to know and wants an audit trail and wants accountability on why things were done a certain way. And you see this playing out. I mean, I was an early advisor to the Sunlight Foundation, which is trying to shine a light on campaign finance and correlating that to voting rights and so on. And you see this enormous battle around the world. And what's happened over the last few years is the governments around the world have started to use these technologies with impunity to spy on the citizenship, right? But little by little, we're turning it around the other way. A good indicator of that is, last year in Russia, that meteor hit, right? And there's about 80 live recordings of this 3-second event of this meteor hitting, right? Live video recordings. And it came from all their dashboard cameras, because it turns out all the Russians have dashboard cameras live recording what's going on. So somebody asked the question, why do they all have dashboard cameras? Is it a weird Russian thing? Is it connected to vodka? What's going on over here? And it turns out that because it's kind of like the Wild West and there's no real rule of law, they use it from a defensive perspective in case there's police fraud or accident fraud. If a policeman comes and breaks your headlight to charge you with a ticket to demand an extortionate bribe, you can essentially record that. And so society is figuring out how to turn that lens the other way. And there's this huge tension going on because the status quo and the powers that be don't really like that very much. They like to operate in secrecy. I think that's one of the more interesting dynamics happening in play. This general sharing of knowledge is now, it's kind of out in the open, because on the internet now you can share opinion. I'm an advisor to a really interesting startup called Hypothesis, which looks at how do you annotate and take a specific phrase and call BS on that phrase if it's incorrect or correct, and can use a peer-to-peer reputation system to gauge how accurate a factual comment is in real time. right? And so as we implement some of these structures to be able to do this, it'll allow us to raise the level of our civics participation, because right now there's a lot more heat than light, right, in all of our public discussions around lots of topics. Other questions? Let's go back there, and then we'll go over here. Question right there. Oh, nice to see you, Bill.
It's good to see you again. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how to connect the technologists better with the people doing impact. Because if you think about like a Louis van Ahn with reCAPTCHA, 10% of the world's population helping to digitize 2.5 million books a year by crowdsourcing a social problem. There's so many opportunities for that, but if you look at the average, even nonprofit or social enterprise or other institutions, they're not connected in a big way with the technologists who are figuring out how to do this. Some ideas on how to for that to happen better.
Actually, part of the reason we exist in the way that we do is to bring together technologists along with policy thinkers, architects, designers, the software side of things, so that you can discuss things and come up with ideas. The best ideas come when you cross disparate areas together, right? And so I think one opportunity here is to, and I think the purpose is to bring together multi-sector participation so that you can feed off each other. When you can bring great policy thinkers into the idea of how does a CAPTCHA work, it's extraordinary what could result out of it, right? And where else could you apply that type of thinking? So I think that we need forums like this, maybe 1,000 more around the world, as to how to think about leveraging technology to solve some of these interesting issues and bring it back to the types of the discussions, have open discussions about where we want society to go. So I think the only answer we have is we created our organization in the same way, but I think the aim here is to do something very similar. So there's a question over here, yeah.
Hi, my name is Jason Aquino. I'm a scout for companies and investors, basically trying to cross-pollinate and try and see what kind of innovation we can facilitate. My question is, when you're trying to kind of cultivate a cadre of folks who can kind of think soundly about the future, think through trends, think through implications, it's so important to kind of surround yourself with kind of the right people, read the right folks, engage the right kinds of organizations. And so my question is, who are you reading? Who are you engaging kind of on a regular basis? The folks that you kind of look at and say, okay, these guys are thinking right about the future, and these are the guys that kind of other folks should be paying attention to.
What are resources? You're really asking that question. What are resources do you think? Well, I'm going to point you straight to Bill Eggers. Bill, can you just raise your hand? Bill runs GovLabs here, and it's a fantastic institute. Did I get it wrong? Okay, Bill wrote a book on government, and Shripti runs GovLabs. And they're doing fascinating work in bringing these technology thinkers along with government thinkers, policy thinkers, bring them together. I think the way that we've attacked the problem and attacked where things should go is basically to say, let's bring the existing young leadership in the world. So in our summer program, we get 4,000 applicants from 120 countries fighting over 80 slots. And when we select our students, we're looking for who will be running these countries in the next 10 or 20 years. If we can arm them with a profound view of where technology is going and how to use some of these accelerations as a lever, and then send them back to their home countries to seed that type of thinking, along with the moral and ethical and mature way of how to think about this, that's kind of the first step. The second step is how do you now scale it? The second part of it is how do you now create projects? Because we learn best by doing. Right? And so let's deploy projects like drones to deliver food and medicine around. Let's use new biotech approaches to solve interesting problems. We've got cancer research companies, drug discovery companies, all sorts of different types leveraging these technologies, because as they go back to their home countries and do this, something interesting will happen. I think there's an enormous possibility now to have drastic innovation happening all over the world, not just in the US. And the Ushahidi phenomena or the M-Pesa phenomena in Kenya are great examples of innovation happening, and that'll bubble up and reverse back to this entire world. And there's probably no better venue or kind of phenomena today to look at this than the Bitcoin phenomena. Right? The centralized approach to monetary systems with this decentralized approach, fundamentally, that will win over time. It's just a question whether it'll be Bitcoin or the son of Bitcoin or the grandson of Bitcoin or something, because it's too efficient for it not to happen. Right? Our old systems simply don't work. And so we're seeing that same type of tension operate across all of these different areas. Healthcare. Right? Vinod Khosla also made the comment that Within 10 years, 80% of what doctors do today will be replaced by technology. Just think about that in a sector as old as healthcare, right? Again, from a mostly positive perspective. But we also have, I'll give you one other area that we're very concerned about, is employment. With the pace and change of robotics, we've made a prediction that within 10 years, no human beings will be needed for manual labor anywhere in the world. Within 10 years. The robotics is moving that fast. If you want a thing to go look up a robot called Baxter, which does a stock picking exercise. It costs $22,000, does not unionize, does not take vacation, does not get sick, does not take coffee breaks, right? And it requires 25 minutes of non-programming effort to teach the robot what to do. And so as you roll that capability out, and that's just the beginning because its capability is doubling every year. And so as you roll that out, what happens to employment? And this is maybe the biggest structural issue we're facing in the short term, is how do we deal with employment? The easy answer is, hey, well, let's turn everybody into makers and entrepreneurs and so on. But a very small segment of the population really has the nous to be able to do that, and the motivation and the character to be able to do that, right? Entrepreneurship is fundamentally a profoundly irrational act. You have to be really crazy, go after a problem because you're totally crazy about that problem with no sense or hope, a 99% likelihood of failure, and go attack it, right? You have to be fundamentally crazy. So any other last questions? Yeah, question over here. Sonal, you manage the time because we'll...
Yes, my name is Bo, and I was just wondering if the Singularity University offers MOOCs.
We don't yet, and part of the reason for that is we try and get across this linear to doubling thinking. It's a very visceral, experiential thing. It doesn't lend itself to an online experience. We have released a lot of our lectures online for free. It's about 30 or 40 hours that people can go look at for free on YouTube. The problem is because our material is changing so fast, we've noticed that our course material changes in a particular topic about 80% annually. So what we're teaching in robotics today is 80% different because the field is just moving so fast. So if we put up a lecture or a talk, it's out of date in a few months. And so we've got a couple of interesting, but there's no doubt that we have to figure out how to do that because to scale to meet that level of demand that we have to figure that out. But we're hoping to create partnerships with organizations like this to think about how to scale that capability. Okay? Okay? All right. Thank you very much.